Boulevard would not exist without Kansas City, and we would not be the brewery we are without Kansas City. So we feel very strongly about celebrating this city.
With great beer comes great responsibility.
Of course.
And it just keeps getting bigger and bigger every year.
Okay, today is a super unique episode of Connecting Kansas City that I'm so excited about. We are recording live at Boulevardia, and it is poppin'. The energy is great. The weather's great. There's so much live music and great food. And I have two special guests with me, Adam Hall and Quinn Reeder of Boulevard. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So I'm going to kind of get the lowdown on each of you with your backgrounds and your job titles here. We'll start with Adam. Adam is the brand manager of culture and strategy.
Yep.
So if you could, in a nutshell, kind of describe your role at Boulevard and what you do on a day-to-day.
What do I do on a day-to-day? So my job is to kind of connect. So Boulevard has three big pillars. We have the production side. So we have the people like Quinn who make the beer. We have the sales side, people who sell the beer to like consumers. And then we have like the marketing department, the people who develop like the labels and write the copy and help with product development. And my job is to kind of bridge the gap between all three of those departments so that we're all speaking the same language. I do a lot of, I work with like Quinn on a lot of product development, new beers. We design like the labels. I ran all like the blog posts and the label copy for the beer labels and package copy. And then I do a lot of, Quinn and I together, we do a lot of like public facing events. So we're more or less like ambassadors of the brewery in addition to our full-time jobs. What'd you say? That's right?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, which is why you're here. Just pile of work on, right? Quinn, tell me about your role.
So I'm mostly in charge of all the barrel aging and sour production at Boulevard. There's a little bit of innovation that goes into that as well. We do have innovation brewer. Shout out to Greg. He's a new hire that we just got, and he's doing a lot of good things for us. But anything that comes out of Boulevard that's ever been in a barrel or anything that has any sort of wild or sour yeast in it, basically is kind of under my umbrella with my team.
How many people are on your team? Like, how many brewers are there?
I have 3 people under my team. So I have Brent.
Shout out.
And Drew.
Brent, Corey, Drew. The dream team, right?
It's a dream team.
So are you guys the only brewers for the whole company, or are there different ones for different products?
So I have my team, and then we have other brewers on the other, what we say clean side. So anything like Space Camper, your Tank 7, unfiltered wheat, all the things that you're getting usually in the market, we have a whole other team for that.
Okay.
We have about 13 brewers on staff for that production. And then for my production, we have 3 plus me.
What about products like Quirk and Fling, and is there a whole other team behind those?
That falls under, production wise, that's all the clean side brewers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Very cool. So Adam, I want to bump back to you for a second. The festival really falls under your umbrella here, Boulevardia. Tell me about like Boulevard's dream behind Boulevardia, the goal, the mission, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so the idea came about like 10 years ago. Boulevard is always, Boulevard would not exist without Kansas City. Kansas City embraced the brewery, really quickly. So we turned 34 this November, and we would not be the brewery we are without Kansas City. So we feel very strongly about celebrating this city, and that's what Boulevardia was meant to be. It was meant to be a celebration of everything that Kansas City provides, but in like 1 or 2 city blocks. So that's why you see 52 like artists and creators and makers and movers and shakers. We've got so many different local, a great music scene in Kansas City, and then we also have some great beer. So we want to kind of pull all of that together and culminate it into what was originally a 3-day weekend, but that it was a long weekend when we did three days. So we decided to scale it back to 2 days. But that's what Boulevardia was meant to be. And then this is year 8 now, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger every year.
Boulevard is so like ubiquitously Kansas City. Like, you guys have traveled a lot and interact with a lot of beers, I assume. Are there other breweries that have the relationship with their city that Boulevard does with Kansas City?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that most, so when Boulevard started, there was probably maybe 300 breweries in the United States, maybe 400. Today, there's like 16,000. So we were like, Kansas City was like the early adopter of the craft beer scene. So we developed a pretty good foothold in the city. The thing about Kansas City, and you know this, Kansas City, the one thing that Kansas Cityans love more than anything else in the world is Kansas City, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you look around today, you'll see all day today, you'll see people wearing Kansas City shirts. And that's just not something you see in like other big cities. You know, they wouldn't be caught dead in a, like, if you live in New York, you're not going to get caught dead in a Charlie Hustle, New York shirt, right? That's like a tourist. We have people that come to the brewery all the time from out of town, and they're like, oh yeah, I was just downtown. Is there some convention going on? Is there like a big sporting event? Everybody's wearing a Kansas City shirt. And I'm like, no, that's just KC, man. We love our city. So while there are other breweries that have this same, like that same like civic pride in the city, embrace them. Boulevard is pretty unique that we're in a city the size of Kansas City, and it's a size of Kansas City of people who love things that Kansas City make. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a handful of companies in Kansas City that are like the Mount Rushmore of Kansas City companies, and that people are like, that's the cool place to work. I feel like Boulevard is one of them. So
what are the other three?
Yeah, I mean, I think Charlie House is one of them.
Okay.
I didn't have to come up with four specific
I was trying to put you on the spot.
Oh no, Barkley,
sure.
Yeah.
Which barbecue joint are you going to call out?
Oh, no. This is not a hot take podcast. I cannot pick. I have a different one for every, like, you gotta have one for your, one for your burn-ins,
Totally.
one for your ribs, one for your fries. Yeah. But anyways, you guys are like, you have the cool jobs for the cool company. Like, what are your backgrounds? How do you end up working for a...
You should take this one.
Well, I mean, it's not too interesting. I mean, kind of the same path that everyone does. So started out in the industry probably about 10 years ago. I guess the life of a brewer before you find your home base is you jump around a lot. So that's just kind of anything in the industry. If you ask anyone, you'll either ask them how long they've been working there, and they'll say, a year or two, and I'm on my way out, or I just came from this other place I just started. So whenever I was coming here, I was doing the bouncing around thing, and whenever I started at Boulevard, it's always a goal for mine. I mean, I'm Missouri raised. I live in St. Joseph. I was born and raised there. So whenever you get a job at a brewery this size, you always kind of take the sacrifice of knowing that you're eventually going to have to move somewhere if you're going to get to some sort of level that you want to. And Boulevard was my first beer whenever I was started drinking, and it's kind of a huge coincidence. Yeah, well, hey.
21, right?
But I mean, it was a great coincidence that I ended up at Boulevard, and it's definitely my home base. So I mean, kind of went through the trials.
Yeah. Man, that's a really classy first beer. You just knew.
I mean, it wasn't classy at all. I went to the grocery store, liquor store, and I think that I saw 6 glass because I was looking for percent of ABV at that point. I didn't know what I was doing. And I think that I drank a 750 of 6 glass and I was good to go. And I was like, well, maybe I'll work here one day.
You were sold. The rest is history. Oh, that's so cool. Are most of you guys that work at Boulevard, especially the brewers, home brewers also, or does it not necessarily go hand in hand?
There's 2 paths to take on that kind of thing. Most of the time, everyone starts out as a home brewer, but there's education that you can do. There's certain certificates and schooling that you can do as well. What I've noticed being in the industry, especially at a place like Boulevard, a lot of our brewers and a lot of our staff that has gone anywhere and wanted to start out in the brewing industry and then into Boulevard is they're all self-made. So there's a lot of not formal education and a lot of experience, and I think that's definitely the way to go. You're going to learn a lot from getting education and stuff like that, but if you're sitting at a brewery and you're learning and you don't know anything and you're scared and you're worried about things, you'll learn a lot more.
Yeah,
being hands-on.
That makes sense. What do you think of the like average Kansas City beer consumers like beer education? Because I've had wine experts on the podcast before, and they were like, Missourians are like, we're like 10 years behind the coast on wine education. We're like just now catching up. Is beer the same way you feel, or are we like further ahead with beer than we?
Well, I mean, I think that Kansas City is a very educated town just because of how long Boulevard has been here, and we made a trusted brand. So when you make a trusted brand, they find something they like, and then when we release something that they are not sure about, they trust our brand to try something. A lot of my beers are going to fall under that umbrella of beers that people don't trust. A lot of big barrel-aged stouts that have been aged in whiskey, wine, rum, tequila, or if I tell people that, a beer that I made was made with some wild yeast that we found on a flower outside of Kansas, that's going to be a really hard sell. But since we made such a trusted brand, we were able to expand these programs a lot farther than a lot of other breweries, which kind of comes back on the point of why, especially with my job, we have one of the largest barrel aging production cellars in America right now, and we have a really robust sour program. A lot of other breweries just don't have that bite on their consumer and probably don't have that trust. So, how long has it been now? 34 years? Yeah.
No. Yeah. Bounce it back over to Adam. So when the brewers come up with like this new creative beer, are you ever like, hey, from a marketing perspective, no, like there's no way?
Yeah, totally. But honestly, I think the opposite happens more often, where someone from the marketing team or the sales team will be like, I have an idea for this great beer, and then they'll throw it together, and then we present it to the brewing team, and the brewing team is like, we can't make that. That's not a product that can exist, or there's no way we're going to make that. I would say usually we're pretty closely aligned. Like if Quinn or any of our brewers have an idea, it's usually enough for us to stop and listen. Like, because we trust our brewers so much because they're flavor makers. I mean, they're taste makers. So usually if they have an idea, that's when we sit up and like listen a little bit closer, because it's rare that a brewer will have an idea for a beer and it's a miss. More often you see like beers on the shelves that are like, just kind of like beers that die on a shelf. Those are beers that were probably built in the marketing department and not by the brewers. Yeah. So
that makes sense. Is there a goal of like a certain number of new beers or seasonal beers you want to introduce every year? Or is it really just when you have creative inspiration and everything comes together?
Yeah. How honest can we be? That's the thing. Yeah. Like I say it depends on who you ask. Like, right. Yes.
Okay. I love it.
So, we like, my job is to interact with the consumers a lot. And so the consumer is always like, what's new? What do you guys got coming? What's limited? So sometimes it's hard for us to keep up, because we want to give like a new beer that we drop enough time to live and breathe. And so for example, this year we had 2 new beers that are year round. We have Joker's Wit, which is like a Belgian double wit beer. And then we have 89, which is just but it's a light American lager. Both of those beers, spectacular. But it takes a while for those brands or those beers to kind of find their foothold and find the right target audience, the right consumer. It takes a while for people to find its audience. There are people out there that are like, they treat beers like it's a sticker book. They're like, I had this beer, check off, what's next? And we're like, this beer's been out for a week. We got to give it some time. So it can be a lot of pressure on our brewing team if we were like, we need a new beer every month. It's just not sustainable. So it's better for the brewers to make, 4 or 5 fantastic limited releases a year, and then let us do the job of going out and putting it in the hands of the consumers and driving trial and sampling it and doing things like the beer dinner at the American tonight, giving those beers an opportunity to kind of live and breathe before we start looking to innovate. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
I would definitely say there's a great balance between our marketing team and our brewers, which I've heard from other people in the industry at other breweries that it's a little bit more of a struggle. So I find that we're pretty lucky. On the other hand of that, one thing with Boulevard's really good about doing too is listening to the brewers' suggestions for new beers, which a lot of people gives us opportunity. We have a couple series out that we release, just very small format, Brewhouse 1 series, Westside Wild series. So that gives us a really good opportunity to make something, and whether it be whatever it is, it's kind of our chance to take like if we're going to take a hit on a beer, we can take a hit on the beer, but we never do. We all make great beers.
Of course, obviously. How long does it take from like an idea to it's on the shelf somewhere?
That's probably more of a marketing question, I guess, for sure.
So it usually happens in 2 different ways. Sometimes it happens really quickly, like you'll have the idea. So I don't know if you've ever been to the beer hall. At our brewery, we have 2 bars. We have a big bar that's got all of our year-round beers, all of our limited releases, and then off to the side is a small bar. It's called the test bar. And so usually the brewers will have ideas. Like our innovation brewer, Greg, he's like, I got an idea for this, whatever it is. And he'll work up a small batch of it and then put it on the test bar. And then we use that as like like a consumer confidence. Like if people keep coming back to the bar for that beer, then we know we have the information. They're like, okay, now we can put some energy behind it, maybe put some brandy behind it, and then think about it. Sometimes that can happen in like 6 months, but there have been beers in the past where it's been like 18 months or 2 years from the time we have a meeting in a conference room over beers, and then we're like, we have this idea for a beer, and we want to make it, and then 2 years later is when we actually see it come off the bottling line. So On the short side, maybe about 6 months. On the long side, where we really want to fully develop it, sometimes it can be as long as 2 years. Yeah.
That's crazy. So does the branding and marketing kind of I feel like Boulevard beers have such a persona. Like every beer has its own character almost. Does that happen? But is like chicken or the egg? Does that happen first, or does the idea happen first usually?
I can't think of a situation where we branded a beer before we made it. The only one I could think of was Dank 7 maybe. But that was only because we have a Dank 7 is like one of our most popular beers, and it's a beer that we've not messed with too much. But this about a year and a half ago, we had a conversation again in a conference room over some beers, and one of our brewers was like Matt Brindleson, right? Oh, it was you. Okay, yeah. So it was Quinn. Yeah, I'll throw it to Quinn. Matt was just for it. I think he supported the project. But we were talking about like, what if we took Tank 7 and really made like a really hop aggressive version of it using hops that come from the Pacific Northwest, which have a really like dank characteristic. And someone in the meeting room said, "I will call it Dank 7." There had been no pen to paper, no recipe made, no nothing. But in that moment, we were like, "Oh yeah, we're making Dank 7." And so then the beer had to be developed. And that was on the long side because we wanted to make sure the beer was right, but we always had that name in our back pocket. So that was the only time in recent memory where I can think of where maybe, but I think the idea for the beer came first, but we happened to come up with a name like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I totally agree. I kind of remember a little bit differently on the production side.
I'm sure you do.
I remember that there was some talk about Dank 7 and we didn't get an answer. So us as brewers just started labeling the test recipe as Dank 7. And then we just kind of said, well, it's already in the system. So we're going to keep that name.
Yeah. I love that. So you guys keep mentioning having meetings over beers. Tell me about the Boulevard culture working there. I assume there's beer fridges everywhere, right? Like, tell me, and does everyone have their favorite beer? Like, do you have like, this is my favorite Boulevard beer that you're like loyal to? Or is it like you have to try all the new ones? Is it like a thing?
So like first thing is with great beer comes great responsibility.
Of course.
We like to have fun. We like to have beers, but having a beer over a meeting is really just reconnecting yourself with your product. It's not, you're not really, you're working in that moment. So, I have a lot of people that are like, oh, you're a brewer at Boulevard, you must just drink beer all the time. It's like, man, no, that is not it at all. Whenever we're drinking beers, we're talking, we're evaluating. So in two different minds, if I'm going to meet Adam at our beer hall to have a catch up or talk about what we're going to be doing in a month or so, I'm going to be drinking a beer like 89 or, Southwest Boulevard, a nice 4%, 4.5% like lager. I'm not really thinking about anything. I'm just there kind of relaxing at the end of my day. We'll also sit around a meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning and we'll be drinking like 14% beer of mine that's been barrel aged in a barrel for a year. And it's not the most fun thing in the world, but we definitely have to do it.
Yeah.
So when I started, I was given 10 years ago, I was given tours and people were always like, oh, you work at a brewery, you must drink beer all the time. And there is that misconception. But I think a lot of us respect our job enough that there's very little abuse that actually happens. We're aware of the product we make, but also to make a good beer, you do have to taste it. So a lot of times when we're having these meetings, we're tasting beer, and people will often ask, like, well, what's the difference between tasting beer and drinking beer? And what I say is, okay, so the difference between tasting beer and drinking beer is the drinking starts when the thinking stops. So it's like we're tasting beer and like fussing over it and like talking about it. And then when we're done talking about the beer, that's when we can relax and, have a beer and then talk about the latest show where we binge watched or how far we are in Tears of the Kingdom. Have you started that yet, by the way?
Diablo 4 came out.
How did COVID impact the culture at Boulevard? Did you ever assume everyone went and worked from home for a while, and that has to really impact what you guys do? Yeah. The brewers didn't ever work from home?
No, we definitely changed up our schedule quite a bit. There was no contact. I'm in a unique situation. I got hired on right in the beginning of COVID.
Okay.
So when I came in, there wasn't a culture change for me with that or a production change, but it's definitely a lot different than it is now. The way that I perceived COVID was, everyone was drinking a lot more beer.
Yeah.
And everyone was drinking a lot more stronger barrel-aged beer. So everyone was having problems with kind of like, nobody's getting our beer. All these keg sales, like whatever. There's no football, basketball, baseball games. But whenever people would go to the grocery store on their one time a week, they'd go to the, counter and they'd see a 4-pack of 13% beer for the same as you can, so they're getting bang for their buck. So in our, during COVID, our barrel aging program actually, I think it went up like crazy numbers around like 35-40% more sales.
That's so interesting. Huh. Has that come back down now that we're kind of quote unquote out of it, or it's stayed steady?
Years, it has not.
Yeah. And then the keg sales and that stuff has come back up to go with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's still filling a vacuum for sure. But I mean, really showed a lot for packaging and packaged beers on the shelf whenever COVID happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you guys have you guys had the like trouble hiring employees situation that so many companies have had in retaining employees and that kind of thing, or not as much just because there's such a cachet to the name Boulevard?
I mean, on the production side, not really. I mean, we're a pretty good name, and we're a pretty we're a big brewery, and a lot of people want to work for us. So we've been pretty fortunate about that. Now, that's not to say that some of those people were on that journey that I was on whenever they came through Boulevard, but there hasn't been any problem kind of filling the gaps on the production side. I don't know about you, Adam.
During the pandemic, the brewery tried really hard to kind of keep everybody solvent because people who were working at the brewery in like administrative roles or marketing roles, like our sales team, those guys and girls, their jobs were to go out into the market and visit retailers and a lot of that, and like bars and restaurants, and the bars and restaurants closed. And so then it's like you have people that are like, okay, this is what I used to do every day. Now I can't do that anymore. So the brewery worked really hard and kind of like there was a redistribution of responsibilities. The administrative folks were able to work from home and still do today. They still like the brewery was like, if you want to work from home a couple days a week, they saw that productivity didn't drop when that happened. But then the sales team, they had to like, okay, your job used to be to call on bars. Now your job is to work closely with like grocery stores where people still are buying beers. And so they were able to redistribute the sales team to keep them employed. And then as the on-premise, like the, bars and restaurants started opening up, then there was that, again, another shuffle where like, okay, we don't need as many people going to Hy-Vee now. Now we need these people to call on our customers that are selling draft beer, and in hopes that the draft business starts to develop and come back as well. So I don't think that we saw a lot of, like, there was a lot of retention during the pandemic. And I don't think we've struggled to fill positions. On the sales side, I don't think there was a lot of turnover. Like we have people that work. So I've been there for 10 years. Quinn's been there for a handful of years. I work with people who've been there for 15, 20, 25 years. People get comfortable at Boulevard because like I moved here to Kansas City in like 2001, and a Boulevard beer was my first beer that I had in KC. And I'm like, this is great. And of course the city was like, oh, you never had Boulevard before? And I was like, well, I'm not from here. I didn't know.
Yeah.
There's this, like this misconception that Boulevard is as big as some of the other national breweries, but it's not. Outside of Kansas City, the name drops a little bit. The recognition drops. So I was like, well, I need to learn more about this Boulevard place, and fell in love with it. And my dream was to one day work there somehow. But yeah, so what was the original question? I'm distracted by this brass band now. It's just...
No, they're killing it. Yeah, they're killing it.
Yeah.
I don't know, but... Yeah, when I travel and I see Boulevard on tap at a bar, and I'm like, oh, it's very exciting. It's like wearing KC
totally.
hats at the airport. It's the same feeling. Yeah. What do you see the future of Boulevard? Like, do you think this company is going to grow and change and expand, or have they kind of figured out what they are and just stay true to it for many years to come?
I think, it's hard. It's really hard to say. We distribute our beer to almost all 50 states. We're sending beer overseas. But really, our job, I think, for the near future is to really focus on our home market, to focus on Kansas City, because that's what made Boulevard what it is today. So I think our focus moving forward is just to continue to keep providing a world-class beer to a world-class city like Kansas City. And, like seltzers, that was a new one that I can see that continue to grow. The Quirk, that was a phenomenon that kind of came out of nowhere. We launched Quirk during the pandemic, and it was like the seltzer craze had gotten so big that we're like, well, we can't fight it anymore, so we might as well join it in a small way. It was meant to be a little side hustle, and now it's 30% of what we do, with a lot of room to run with the hard seltzer. We have some really cool things that we're going to be doing within that segment in the years to come that I'm really excited for Kansas City to get to explore. The barrel age program, we went from like 10 years ago, we had 2 whiskey barrels. Now Quinn has 5,000 oak barrels that he has to manage and drink every day. No, I'm joking about the drink every day, but he's also taken that from a singular style to where it used to just be like a big, like imperial style aged in bourbon barrels when that was the classic barrel aged beer. And now Quinn has been able to take that program and do some really wild, fun stuff with it. And so I think that's going to continue to grow as well as we're able to innovate in that space. So
yeah, that's cool. That's crazy that Quirk only came out in 2020. I did not know. It's already such a big name. Yeah. Yeah. Do you foresee Boulevard expanding into other things like distilling or winemaking or anything like that, since you've kind of expanded into the seltzer world here?
We've been known to make a wine or two.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's kind of like with my program, we kind of get into a little bit more of like other fermented beverages. The distilling thing, I don't know. I think that we, shout out to Holiday Distilling actually, because I don't know why we would when we have like a world-class distillery in our backyard, which we have a great partnership with. All their barrels are what we use in our program as well. And
does Boulevard have much of a relationship with other local brewers? Because I feel like beer is kind of the thing that like one ship rises, they all rise kind of thing, where like if someone gets into beers through another brewery, it still helps Boulevard because now they're into beer, right? Like, is there any sort of relationships between breweries?
I mean, absolutely. Taps and Taste, for example, is we're having a lot of out-of-town breweries, but we always try to keep, we try to get as many local people as we can in there. The original idea for the Taps and Taste experience was to get breweries that people cannot get in Kansas City here. But we still have to pay homage to a bunch of the other breweries that are here. And we try to get good rotation on that every single year. If you were getting off of an airplane and the first place you stopped was Boulevard, you might have 2 or 3 beers there. And whenever you're checking out, I think any one of our beer tenders would tell you 4 other breweries that you need to check out while you're in Kansas City. And I've seen that happen. And I mean, I've even been in the tap room whenever I'm just, having my like shift beer after work, and people will say, well, this brewery sent us here. So it's cool. There's no competition in the community.
Yeah. Wow. Let's be honest. There's not a lot of competition for Boulevard. So this last one is a question I ask everyone that comes on the podcast. What is a great meal you've had in Kansas City recently? Like restaurant rec, but like a specific dish you had that was just like mind blowing.
So just like 2 weeks ago, I ate at the new Italian restaurant in is it Crestwood? Is that them? It's over in Brookside, but like just south of Brookside. Or just north of Brookside, called Bacara Primo. Have you eaten there yet?
No.
Oh, so it's the same guys, same group that opened Earl's Premier, which also check it out. But Bacara Primo, it's right off of Warnell. I think it's called Crestwood is the little shopping area there. But that meal was outrageous. I did not have a single beer while I was there. I did have a lot of wine and I had a Negroni. And I had some Amaros after dinner, but I would put that on your list. Bacara Primo. It was outrageous.
Sounds amazing.
So, I mean, first came to my mind is the last time I had a really great meal was I think they're right over there in Crossroads District, Novel. They had some, I think it was it's like some sort of ravioli that was stuffed with like bone marrow and just like very simple ingredients. I mean, seriously, like probably like 3 ingredient like ravioli, so simple, but just like so rich and everything like that. They have a fantastic whiskey selection and bourbon selection there. And I really like the way that they're doing things down there. I try to get there as much as I can.
Yeah, awesome. Kansas City has such an underrated foodie scene. That's why I always ask everyone.
Yeah,
because it's legit restaurants. So I went Wednesday night, had a little girls' night out. We went to Extra Virgin and then the Mercury Room, which I had never done the Mercury Room before. Yeah. Extra Virgin is always amazing. Like everything is phenomenal. Yeah. But I had never done the Mercury Room before. So like super cool. But you have to go on a random Wednesday or book 6 weeks in advance, basically. So yeah. Well, guys, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate your time. I know you're busy. Adam and Quinn, thank you for being here and good luck with the rest of the weekends.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much for joining us today. If we haven't already, let's connect. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Pinterest, LinkedIn, and TikTok at Rach the Realtor KC. We're back right here every Thursday morning with a new guest on Connecting KC. See you next time.